Hi, Reality Riffing. As always, I'm looking to talk to people who have unique takes on how to be more empowered around our health. And I got to talk to Dr. Aumatma Shah, who is a naturopathic doctor who specializes in fertility, both for women and for men, and the whole gender spectrum. And I found her on social media and was immediately impressed by some of the practical and really accessible ways that you can help to increase your what she called pro-fertility type of health, but I would call it pro-vitality, because even if you're not interested in having a child anytime soon, or maybe you're past that time in your life, it's really about vitality and how to work with the endocrine system and the reproductive system in a way that gives you a lot of longevity and a lot of health in your daily life. So we specifically talked a lot about fertility and also planning, because I think one of the things that is happening for a lot of people is that we are living differently. And so our 20s, our 30s, our 40s, our 50s and beyond, they look very different. And so I think taking a sober look at that and really starting to use the time in an intelligent way allows for us to be in more command of when and if we do decide to have a child and how that all goes. This conversation with Aumatma Shah is filled with practical advice, and she is really doing spectacular things in the realm of fertility, health, and vitality. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for coming on the show, and I'm just so happy that you're here.
Absolutely. I'm really happy to be here.
So I would love for you to just share with our audience, which is, we have a lot of women and a lot of women who are both in the motherhood process or thinking about it. And I work with a lot of women globally. And I think this is just a huge piece of what the new era looks like, is how we can tackle some of our health and what I think is a war on women's health. And so I'd love to just hear your kind of thoughts on fertility and women's health, and can just give us a general background.
Yeah, sure. So I kind of got into this through my own personal journey, and I was already doing a lot of women's health. I was already practicing naturopathic medicine, which for those of the listeners who don't know, naturopathic medicine is kind of like integrative medicine. We do Eastern and Western. We're trained in both ways of thinking about things, but really, I think what makes us unique is that aspect of holism, where we're looking at not just one aspect of a person's health, but all of the interconnectedness within our bodies. So I think that I was practicing that for quite some time and was going through my own questions around fertility. And that's when I got way deep into the research. And what I found were the inconsistencies between what women are generally being told. And I feel like I learned the same messages in medical school. So
Yeah.
I don't consider that to be very different. Um, versus what's actually available to us through research and what the kind of research is saying. And when I started seeing those discrepancies, especially around like, oh, your fertility is going to magically decline at 35. And that's partly what had brought me into this question of what am I doing? Am I having babies? When? What's going to happen? And exploring that and really coming through the depths of the research with a better belief in my own body. And why are we lying to women? Like, why are we not just telling them, listen, you should take care of your fertility and you should get tested and all of these things. But let's not pretend that you're going to magically disappear on the fertility map at the age of 35. Like,
Right.
we can have a different message that's more empowering and more supportive to not freaking people out while the message of you should still take charge and not wait until you're in your 40s to even start thinking about this stuff. So
Yeah.
this kind of like balance between we don't do anything until the point of you're ready to have a baby, and we kind of like ignore, suppress, take birth control, whatever, you know, like the consciousness around that.
Yeah.
And then we suddenly shift to, and now you want to have a baby and it's too late.
Right.
And
Right.
like, where's the middle ground, and why are we not talking about this sooner, so that there is more awareness before we get to that point, and we're not in a struggle of like, oh my god, this is never going to happen for me. So that's kind of that's a very long answer, but I think that that's partly why I'm so passionate about it, is because we are sending women these messages that I just am not sure are totally aligned with our state of our planet and what we want to be
Yeah.
knowing about our own bodies.
Yeah, that was what really struck me about your message, because just in my own, I know and certainly talk a lot about what I feel are medieval practices and messages that are still highly practiced and broadcasted around women, their bodies, and their health, even in 2020. It's really sobering, but also just in my own experience of going to the gynecologist that or the OBGYN that was recommended to me by very forward thinking West Los Angeles type of birthing people, and feeling what the lack of the bedside manner and just this kind of middle way that you describe, there was
Mm-hmm.
really, it was even in that kind of scenario was very not present. And so I'm also passionate about bringing these messages to women about their health, and having sovereignty and taking command, but also not being in the fear mongering. So thank you for everything you're
Yes.
doing.
Thank you. Yeah.
So let's talk about, I think, for because of the way that we've been kind of conditioned as humans, not just women, to not be in connection to our health in a certain way, and not really understand that our youth is not something just to burn at both ends in our 20s and then just pay for it the rest of our life. What can you give us, kind of like, let's say, like for women in their 20s, for women in their 30s, or for anyone who's interested in having, a child, 20s, 30s, 40s, what are some just recommendations that or seeds that are you'd like to plant for people?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I wish that I'll just say it from my own perspective. So I wish that I had known in my 20s, one, that I wasn't going to suddenly get pregnant just by looking at a man. Right? I'm exaggerating a little bit, but not a
Yeah,
lot.
yeah.
The education that I had was obviously tainted with my culture and background, which is Indian.
Yeah.
So the message that we got within our family unit was like, oh my God, if you even talk to a guy, you're going to get pregnant, and all this fear around, don't do it. Right. And then the message that I got in school was make sure you're on birth control or using condoms, because it can happen so quickly and you're going to get pregnant and whatever. So a lot of fear around like how easy it was to conceive. And had I known what I know now, our chances of getting pregnant in any given cycle are like 25%. Um, so the chances is really kind of low to begin with. And why, like, I wish I had known what I learned later on about charting our cycles, and just like, maybe you need to be on birth control, maybe you don't, but really like making that decision from a more aware, conscious place is what I wish for every woman in her 20s to have knowledge about. So if we start there, then really focusing in on charting, understanding hormones, like awareness of what's happening within our bodies as we're going from month to month. So we have that awareness and kind of the lifestyle tools to just don't push yourself to the limit, right? Like, don't move from that masculine energy of go, 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 and I have to create all this stuff and accomplish all these things, but really taking that time to be more in tune with our own feminine energies and being ingrained with like slow down, receive, ask for help, get support, like all of these messages that I think are getting more popular now, but maybe are still not in mainstream awareness. So that's what I would have aimed for in my 20s. In my 30s, I think it would just be lovely to have that message around empowerment be the front runner rather than the message around fear with like, if you don't freeze your eggs, you're probably not going to have a child, or if you're getting to 35, you're going to be too old very quickly.
Right.
So instead of those messages, the message being, hey, get your hormones tested like you would get a gyne exam every year. Like, why is hormonal balance not just part of a screening exam that we do for everyone across the board? So, shifting into getting baselines and hormone tests sooner so we're aware of what's happening within our bodies. We're not putting band-aids on things like PCOS, where a woman has abnormal hormonal cycles, abnormal menstrual cycles. She gets put on birth control, and then she has no idea that she's going to maybe potentially have issues when she's trying to get pregnant.
Right.
Or if you have irregularities, like you have extremely painful periods, that's a really like not letting your primary care or your OBGYN say, oh, that's normal. It's normal to be in pain. No, it's not normal to have a 10 out of 10 level of pain every single month. So more awareness around, hey, if there are these weird things that are going on that you feel are abnormal, find a doctor that's going to help you sooner rather than later. Don't wait till you're trying to get pregnant. So that aspect around taking charge of your fertility, which doesn't necessarily have to be getting pregnant. It can be how to have better periods, how to not be in pain, how to have more in tune and more in sync with what's happening from a month to month basis. So those would be my kind of leading messages in 20s and 30s.
Yeah. Really important.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then, I mean, into our 40s, I think we're getting to that place. I'm a few months away from 40. And
it's so good, let me tell you.
Thank you. The white hair showing, so we're getting to that place of being in our 40s, which can really be an empowered age. And if you have children by that point, awesome. If you don't and are still thinking about it, to definitely make sure that you've planned and prepared in your 30s so that it's not a huge struggle when you get to 40, to maybe have a child in your early 40s. I think, the struggle that I see a lot now when we're in the deep end of fertility stuff is women in their early 40s who don't have any ovarian reserve. Their egg numbers are just really low. It's going to be really hard to get pregnant. And that's not based on age. That's really based on what's happening in a woman's body. Yeah. And had she been tested in her 20s and 30s, someone would have told her that, but she waited till she was 43, and now she's going to come to our practice and say, hey, can you help me? And we can say, well, we can try, but gosh, I wish you had made it in here 10 years ago, Yeah. So really, like, not waiting if that's your intention to create a family and be more in a active process with the fertility rather than just waiting till you're actually ready to get pregnant.
And
Um,
is there
mhm.
are you guys seeing low ovarian reserves being connected to some things both in choice in terms of lifestyle, but also I mean, what explain that to someone who doesn't really know what that could be? Are you seeing a connection to lifestyle and lifestyle choices to low ovarian reserve?
Yeah, I wish we had more studies that were long-term studies, right? If we started testing women maybe when they were 15 and continue testing them and can see that scope of age, we might know better things. But my suspicion, at least based on the research that I've done, is that there is a effect of the quality of our lifestyle, and that kind of it you can preserve fertility on some level with a good healthy lifestyle. That would mean good eating, wholesome food, right? Like staying away from as much processed food as possible, staying away from GMOs, which I think are a can of worms in some ways, but they're genetically modified organisms. They are going to genetically modify the eggs that you have in your body or the sperm that you have being produced in your body. So, staying away from the stuff that is anti fertility, staying away from the overwhelm of toxins. Most papers that I've seen say, on average, a woman will walk out of the house in the morning with 130 toxins on top of her body. Hair, skin, wherever, like it's going on all parts of our body,
Yeah.
130 different toxins on
Wow.
average.
Wow.
So, you know, like eliminating what we can and not stressing about what we can't, but at least that we're making an effort to get rid of the crap that we can get rid of. Um, the quality of air that we breathe, the quality of the water that we're drinking. Is our water coming out of plastic bottles? Like the effect on plastic, specifically
Yeah.
like BPA, BPS, and BPF that's in the plastic bottles, that is then getting the water is just sitting in these bottles. It's leaching in, and then we're drinking that water, hoping that it nourishes us. So, kind of moving through every portion of our lifestyle in a way that's like, is this fertility friendly or is it anti fertility? And I think on some level, a lot of us actually already know, but how do we take action on the things that we know? The other things that I've seen is, the intake of alcohol and coffee, and not that either one of those things are absolute no's, but a lot of the women that I've worked with who maybe have high powered jobs, a lot of them have like literally told me that they cannot cut out alcohol because it's part of their job.
Right.
Like it's part of their job requirement to go and like drink with colleagues and whatever. And it breaks my heart that that is so ingrained in our lifestyle that a woman thinks that it's a necessity for her to function in the world that we've created.
Yeah.
And that the effect of those compounds, the way that it's affecting our hormones, is not the best. And if we're doing that 4, 5, 6 days of the week, that's definitely not going to land us in a place that's going to preserve our fertility for the future. So, I think yes, I feel like there is a definite fertile lifestyle and a non-fertile lifestyle, and making sure that if um, a child or a family in the future is something that a woman is reaching for, then we as practitioners and healers on this planet have the tools to empower this woman to say, okay, sure, yeah, you can wait, and You may choose to freeze your eggs if that's the path you want to go, or you may choose to live a nice, healthy lifestyle. But freezing your eggs may not mean that you can do whatever you want for the next 15 years before you
Right.
decide to use those eggs.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Well,
Um,
I think also, I mean, what do you, because when I see, obviously, we're with our women's community, is with women on all spectrum of either wanting or trying or having the postpartum of it all. Then you have to deal with
mhm.
you both your own health and these things called children. Um,
Yes.
so I'm just curious, something I've seen, and of course, I'm not a doctor, but I am a doctor of the mind. And something I've seen a lot, and I'm curious what your thoughts on this are, is that when people get into kind of this ferocious fertility dance of trying to get pregnant, or there's a concern about it, or maybe they are a little older or something, some hormone panel has shown something, or they've tried for a little while and it's not happening. Something that I've noticed is that everyone forgets about sex, and there's like a whole, and I'm just curious your take on this aspect of fertility, where it's just like all of a sudden we've forgotten that having really deep and good and often sex is really important, even if you're doing an IVF or
Yeah.
I mean, what's your opinion on this?
That's interesting. I, at least in my practice, I haven't seen that as much. I find that a, I would say I've had one patient ever who like blatantly just did not want to have sex with her partner, and she was like, "Nope, just want to get pregnant through IVF, and you're here to help me do that." Um, but most other patients are having sex, and you know, we tend to just ask, we just ask them, right? Like we're not, there's no like mathematical way that we can measure the quality of sex that they're
Of
having.
course, of
But
course.
absolutely, like if a woman is not having an orgasm when she is having sex that's pro pregnancy, the orgasm actually helps to get the sperm up into the cervix so that they can go and meet the egg. And the like action of the orgasm is actually helping to pull these sperm up.
Right, right.
So it's super vital that if one is not having an orgasm, and or if that sex is maybe painful, which I've seen definitely quite a bit, and it's not enjoyable, that needs attention. And it is an important aspect. And, I'm not a sex therapist or a sex coach or anything, but we we definitely have people that we refer to when it comes to women who are having maybe painful sexual experiences, or not having orgasms that don't have to do with the emotional state. I think a lot of times they do. And a lot of
Yeah.
times, especially when women are, or couples are on this fertility journey, it's actually the guy that comes in and says, I am so sick of it. This whole like time sex, like I'm supposed to be at her beck and call whenever she feels like it, or whenever her app tells her she's ovulating. Um, and that takes away the magic of it, right?
Right.
So a lot of my advice tends to be to take away, like, yes, get in tune with your cycles, get in, like, know when you're ovulating, but don't, it's not such a small window like we imagine, right? Often the ovulation strips that women use, or the predictor kits or apps, they're giving you this like really tight window where your egg dropped, and it's not so easy. Like it's really that time period, and that period can be a couple of days before the ovulation happens, and a couple of maybe like a day or two after ovulation happens. You have enough of a window to have sex that's meaningful and is going to potentially lead to a pregnancy that's not so pressured.
Right.
And that pressure just works against, especially the guys. Like, men do not like this, like, oh my God, it has to happen now. And if you don't give me your sperm, it's not going to happen. And guys don't want to feel like the sperm donor. That's not a good place to be.
No,
So,
not sexy, not sexy.
not
Um,
sexy.
but how about in the cases where you're dealing with kind of a bigger gender spectrum? What
Oh, yeah.
I've certainly I was talking to a couple, two women, and they were also talking about, you know, the kind of calamity of errors of trying to inseminate, and how just like odd and awkward it was.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, just in terms of that, is there, you know, kind of any advice that you have for?
Yeah. Y- Um, you know, we do have same-sex couples in our practice, and the like the sacredness of that experience when conception happens is so magical. At least I don't know if that's true for everyone, but I feel like I felt it in such a deep way. And um I try to get couples to invite that in as like, this is a sacred moment, regardless of what the outcome is, regardless of whether you get a positive pregnancy test. It is, let's just have this experience as a beautiful, amazing thing that's happening between the two of us. And if a child comes out of that, wonderful. It's going to be the manifestation of love in within us. But um, so taking that like pressure off, as well as at the same time like inviting the sacredness of it into the bedroom and creating a space for it, because especially when it's happening with same-sex couples where you're using some sort of insemination technique to get the sperm in there, can be kind of non-sexy. So
Right.
making it into a ritual that's fun and sexy in some other way is really helpful.
Yeah, yeah, I can, I feel that, because you can make, I mean, really anything can become sacred with intention. Um, what have you found in terms of, you hear these things like, and I certainly in the yogic science we talk about different cervix positions.
Mm-hmm.
Have you found that there really is a more positive pregnancies when there's a tilt in the pelvis, or if you are dealing with a certain cervical position? Anything on
Mm.
that?
You know, when you first started asking that question, what came to my mind was actually the cervix drops when you're ovulating. So our bodies are naturally taking care of it,
Mm,
which is really amazing, right? Like, I hadn't thought about it before, but it's so cool that our body is just naturally getting our cervix into this optimal position to improve our chances for getting pregnant.
so cool.
Whether the I've heard all these like leg up the wall and all that kind of stuff. Honestly, we've never recommended it, never used it in my practice. I feel like some of it may be old wives' tales, some of it may actually be really amazing like yogic practices that I think could benefit. But I don't know enough about it to
Yeah,
recommend it, so I haven't.
yeah, yeah. What
But I
are,
feel like there is this like really amazing, like just what nature is doing on its own, to me is always fascinating.
it's so poetic, and when you study when you study the body, I feel like even if you're not a religious person, it's a religious experience to see how
So,
gracefully we're put together. I mean, it's just crazy.
Yeah.
It's very
Yeah.
beautiful. What are your top recommends? So if someone is trying to get pregnant, what have you seen really works?
hmm I think I'll give you the foundations, which are what I find most often. Um, Couples need to drink enough water, right? Good quality, pure water. And the number of times that we make this recommendation where people are not, I would say 95% of our patients are not drinking enough water.
Wow.
Um, so it's that prevalent and so important. Like, if you don't have enough hydration in the body, there's just a whole lot of functions that cannot go well. Hormones, hormones moving and communicating with the parts that they should be communicating with. The quality of hydration is going to affect the quality of the eggs and sperm, for that matter. And the hydration is going to affect our cervical fluid production. So the right consistency of cervical fluid that will help to conceive when you're ovulating is super important. So it basically affects every part of the fertility pathway.
Hmm.
And the so hydration, what I like to remind my patients is you can't count coffee or tea as hydrating. And it's actually dehydrating. So it's working against you. If you're drinking coffee, you need to multiply that amount of coffee by 4 to make up for the hydration dehydration ratio. And if you're drinking
Wow.
tea, yeah. And if you're drinking tea, you need to take that amount and multiply it by 2. So when we do the math, most people are way dehydrated and have been counting their coffee and their tea and all the other things like juice and whatever they drink as hydration, and it's not.
Yeah.
So making sure that you're fully hydrated. The second would be good, wholesome, nourishing food. And we can talk about to do, not to do, but in general, our approach is you need all of the different foods. You cannot eliminate grains, which I think have become quite the enemy these days.
Yeah.
And most of the studies actually show that diets with at least a minimal amount of grain did way better than diets without any grains.
Well, because
So
I've always noticed, just like as a layperson, that when I see especially a woman who's on a grain-free diet, she doesn't seem happy. Like the happy hormones have been taken completely out, because
yeah,
good grains, they help to produce hormonal happy hormone vibes. I mean, that is
yes,
true.
yeah,
Of course, you can
yeah.
always overdo it, but
Totally. I think there is you can overdo it, and maybe the processed grains that turn into bread and pasta and things like that are not as great. But on a very basic level, you cannot be carbohydrate free. Your
yeah,
body needs
yeah,
carbohydrates.
yeah.
Um, so making sure that you're eating all of the different food groups, getting at least 30 a variety of 30 different plant foods in your diet is a good goal to go for 30 different plant foods per week. Sorry, I missed that per week part.
Per week. Okay.
Um, yeah,
That's a nice number for people to kind of figure out.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're when you're thinking about it from that aspect, you're really going to emphasize variety rather than what it exactly is, right? And I think the variety is really what's important.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Why
the
why
variety,
variety?
perfect. I was just
Yeah.
going to say the variety in our diet is actually what feeds our microbiome.
Mm.
So we want to make sure that we have a good, healthy microbiome, which is then going to affect the production of just what you said, GABA and serotonin, which are the happy, relaxed hormones in our body. And if we don't have those hormones, you can almost guarantee that there will be an imbalance in estrogen and progesterone because of those imbalances in our microbiome.
Hmm.
So, additionally, the microbiome You might have heard of this term called estrobolome, which is the microbiome that specifically metabolizes estrogen in our gut. So when you don't have that, you are going to have potentially a buildup of estrogen, which is then going to create all kinds of havoc in your fertility hormones.
Yeah.
So those are two good foundations. The other I would say is sleep. And like, I'm doing all the basics, right? But the number of people that report either that they're not sleeping well, so they can't fall asleep easily, or they wake up in the middle of the night and take a long time to go back to sleep, or B, they wake up, they get 8 hours, 9 hours, whatever it is, they wake up in the morning and they're still not rested. So if you need a cup of coffee to get going in the morning and you don't wake up with like, wow, I'm refreshed, I'm ready to go, then your sleep, the quality of your sleep is not actually sufficient. So just kind of observing for yourself, like, are you waking up rested? Are you sleeping through the night, and are you waking up rested? And there's a lot, we're going to be hearing a lot more about something called the cortisol awakening response, which is this initial surge of cortisol that we get within the first 30 minutes of waking up.
Right.
And that cortisol response is, if it's not happening, that's a really good sign that something is out of whack that is causing that response to not happen. And that response is super vital to our hormonal functions. So making sure that we're having that response. And some of the tips that I give to help shift that is, like, really the screens that we have and the blue lights coming off of the screens are affecting the production of melatonin at night, which then affects the production of cortisol in the morning. Mm-hmm. So it really starts the evening before that, you making sure that you use like blue light filter glasses if you're watching TV or working on your computer or whatever it is. And then making sure you're sleeping in a completely dark environment, turning down your Wi-Fi at night if possible, at least turn off your phones, like turn it into airplane mode. At the minimum. And then if you can, shut down the whole Wi-Fi system in the house, but my husband won't go for that. So I always tell my patients to do what I can do, right? What seems reasonable enough.
Well, I mean, I don't know. We don't do it, but I think you can just turn the thing off.
Yeah. Well, my partner says that, like, there's a whole bunch of things that are dependent on Wi-Fi for us, so we can't. But I'm sure if we really were motivated, we could, and it would be wise to do that. Yeah. But my phone gets turned into Wi-Fi mode or airplane mode at night. So, at the minimum, doing those things will help increase the quality of sleep, which is then going to help with the cortisol awakening in the morning. And then if you're sorry, I just lost my train of thought with the melatonin. So not having, or maybe I should say it in the flip. So having a good amount of melatonin is actually going to reflect in the quality of the eggs that our body's creating. So if you have, let's say you have 2 to 3 months where you're not sleeping well, you're stressed out, that's enough to affect the egg quality for the next 3 months. So that's really making sure. Yeah.
That's very interesting. That's a very important thing for people to understand.
Exactly. Yeah. So it, like, I know all of these sound like super basic things, but the number of times that is the conversation that we need to have to begin with is really, really high. And doing these things actually give you the most bang for your buck. So we can go into like what supplements and all that kind of stuff, but the foundation is really important, right? The number of supplements that you take isn't going to compensate for the quality of the lifestyle that you have. And the effect that that lifestyle has on all of your hormones.
Which I mean, I really appreciate, because as much as, I mean, I am so blessed to have wonderful doctors and healers, and and as many times as I get put on supplemental protocols, I'm a terrible supplement taker, and I really like things that I can do that don't require me to take supplements. And I do think it's important that people understand that it's a supplement. It's not going to create this kind of most of what you just said, besides, I guess, getting a certain type of grocery, is something that is not that, either free or not expensive at all. And
Exactly.
I do think, I
Exactly.
mean, that's an important, but it's so interesting that the melatonin production, if you have some stressed out months, even, or month, that's going to affect the months after in terms of your reproductive health.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Like melatonin is one of our body's best antioxidants that is affecting the quality of our eggs. So, not producing good amounts of melatonin is going to directly affect egg quality.
Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
Pretty wild.
Yeah. And then how long do you think it takes you to get back? Because I'm sleeping more than I ever do. I'm on the road for 250 days a year. And in this current stay at home order right now, I'm definitely sleeping more than I ever have. How long do you think it takes you to kind of bounce back from the depletion of lack of sleep and travel?
Yeah, I think if you do that consistently, and if you're getting that for about 3 months, that's going to be enough to impact the quality of your eggs that will come in the future. So, yeah, not super long, right? Like, I feel
Yeah.
like a lot of times patients are coming in expecting, oh, I didn't look into it sooner because I thought it would take forever. And I'm like, well, all of our programs are like 4 to 5 months because that is what is needed. That's all that's needed to get the quality of the egg and the sperm to be great so that you can have the next times that you try be more successful. So
Mm.
we don't need a ton of time, but we do need enough to, like, I can't do anything for the people that are coming and saying, "Oh, can I come do something with you so that my IVF cycle next week can be better?" And I'm like,
Right.
"Yeah, there's not a lot I can do. I'm sorry."
Right. Right.
Um, so there is that balance of like, we need some time, but it's not a ton of, like, it's not years of doing stuff to get a difference, which I think is amazing.
And what about a melatonin supplement and any other, basic, if you were going to give me three supplements to, not just if you're trying to get pregnant, but also to
Mm-hmm.
support what you're calling pro fertility, which is what I would just
Yeah.
call pro vitality,
Yeah.
to have a vital system. That's really
Mm-hmm.
what fertility is. Um, what would be your 1, 2, 3 punch in terms of supplementation
Mm-hmm.
for hormonal health for?
Yeah. That's a great question. So my favorites are B vitamins. So a really good quality B vitamin will go a long ways in supporting all of your hormones, neurotransmitters, and just overall health in general.
Okay.
So most people will say, "Oh, well, my multivitamin has B's in it." And my perspective is your multivitamin probably doesn't have high enough amounts of B's to make it or break it for you. So I would add a B vitamin. In addition to a B vitamin, actually, even more specific on that, making sure that the B vitamin is a good quality one. So screening for supplements is two levels. One is you want to make sure that there isn't a bunch of other crap in it. So if you look at the label and it has a long list of other ingredients, it's not good.
Yeah.
So just throw it away.
Yeah.
If it is a relatively short list and it's things that you can mostly recognize and say, it's probably okay. Like magnesium stearate is not the best thing ever, but it's probably okay.
It's a
Um,
filler of some sort.
yeah.
Yeah.
So as few fillers as possible. And then the second level of a vitamin or supplement to look for is it the right kind of nutrient? So for example, I'll just pick on this because it's easy. Folic acid, which is a B vitamin, it's normally in a B complex. However, if it's folic acid, it's actually not a good B vitamin supplement. So, folic acid is not what we should be taking. What we really need is folate, ideally 5 methyl tetrahydrofolate, which is sometimes abbreviated 5-MTHF, or at the minimum, it says folate, not folic acid. And historically we've kind of conflated those two nutrients,
Right.
but folic acid is what we get from a lab. It's not natural to our bodies. Folate is what we get out of green leafy vegetables, nuts, beans, seeds, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So really making sure that it's the right kind and it's what nature recognizes as a nutrient and a supplement that it can actually utilize in the body rather than something fake that is really hard to use. And that we could break that down to every single nutrient that is in a vitamin. We're going to want to have the right forms of it. So, yeah, just kind of if a supplement, a B vitamin supplement has folate, that can be probably a good flag to say that's probably a decent supplement if it has folate instead of folic acid. They were enough aware to put that in, so they likely did the right thing with all the other nutrients.
Okay, good. That's a good tip.
Yeah. So B vitamins. The second one would be magnesium. Magnesium is a cofactor in almost every process in our body. Like so many multiple cell processes use that magnesium as an essential cofactor. And magnesium gets depleted when we're stressed out.
Yeah.
And how many of us are not stressed out?
Right.
So that one, I think, makes the cut in terms of essentials.
Yes, yes.
And then for fertility specifically, or pro fertility, essential fatty acids. So those could be, if you're vegan or vegetarian, you might veer towards something that's flaxseed or hemp oil based. And if you're not, then fish oil based. But omega-3 fatty acids and really those omega-3s help to balance the amount of omega-6 that's in our diet. So omega-6 we get from nuts and seeds. We also get it from meat. We get it from most of the food that we eat is omega-6, which increases inflammation. And then omega-3 is the anti-inflammatory. So we want to make sure that we're getting those into balance as much as we can. So those would be my top 3 as far as supplements go, especially for fertility, but I think those are good general recommendations regardless.
Yeah, yeah. And those are all very easy. And I mean, those are doable. And what do you think about taking melatonin to supplement melatonin depletion? Do you think it works?
Yeah, I think melatonin supplementation is a good thing if you have low levels of it. But in general, my approach tends to be like, how do we help your body make its own?
Yeah.
Which I think is slightly better. So in the case of melatonin, I think there's a product called herbatonin, which is more herbal based melatonin, which I think works even better than a generic melatonin supplement. But I think above all else, you got to do the foundational things that will support your own melatonin production. I think it's a good supplementing is good in the midterm while you're trying to heal everything and get everything in alignment. What I will say is that I just read a paper last week, which had us like flipping through every single client we ever worked with and making sure that they're not taking melatonin. All the men that we had on melatonin supplements, we pulled off of because of one paper that suggested that melatonin supplementation in men could be affecting the quantity of sperm
Hmm.
produced.
Hmm.
So melatonin for men may not be so good. And it may not be as, generically okay for everyone to take. And I think that's kind of true for a lot of supplements. Like a lot of us think like, oh, it's a supplement, it's natural, it's safe, right? But the truth is, like, so many people come into our office with shopping bags full of supplements, and I'm like, nope, not that, not that, not that. And we're taking away like 2/3 of what they're taking. And they're like, but you're taking away all my stuff. And I'm like, yes. And we're going to get way more specific with only what you need, what
Yeah.
you're really deficient in, because everything else is just making either like high quality expensive urine,
Yeah.
or B, it's actually working against you
Well,
and
because
not
the body has to
helping.
process it. I mean, I think that's
Yeah.
people don't really get that
Yeah.
the body has to process the supplementation too in some way, and not all,
Yes.
and if it's not being used and all that, and if it's not bioavailable, and so one, I'll end with this question because I do think it's just kind of a general women's health question, and
Yeah.
I feel like it's something that is really, something I always wonder about, which is that you had said something about uh, being as a woman getting kind of a yearly hormonal testing and that being a
Yeah.
part of just kind of general health stuff.
Yeah.
What's your take on my experience with the hormonal testing is that I haven't found a lot of people who I feel like actually can interpret that information in a way that feels actually valuable to me,
Yeah.
because it's like, yeah, I know I'm stressed out. And okay, so for me, and I think a lot of women who have high powered jobs and a lot of travel, my progesterone is low. Um, what I mean, how does this information really help us, or how do you suggest interpreting it so it can
Mhm.
help us, and be pragmatic? Because I do feel like it can also end up being just like another place where you feel like, fuck, what am I, I don't know what to do. Like, I have to work my job and I love my job, and
Yeah.
I'd like to do, and I'm a vegetarian, so I can't, or whatever the things are. So do you have any suggestions or advice about that? Because I do feel like it's a bit of a kind of catch 22 in some ways.
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a great question because I feel like that happens a lot. And my response is, starting with what is your goal, right? Like, how do you want to feel? If it's just for a screening, there are tests that you need to screen for your fertility. And the basics are FSH, LH, AMH, and estradiol. Those are the four specific tests done on day 3 of your cycle.
Right.
Besides those, and like after you get those results, you really want to speak to a specialist who can say, hey, your AMH is getting kind of low and it's reflected in your FSH is starting to go up, which means you're kind of running out of time on your ovaries. Like, that clock is ticking way stronger than we want it to be ticking. So either you need to slow it down or take some action and figure out how we're having a baby soon. So, like, knowing your end goal in mind. If it's the fertility aspect, then you have those specific hormones. If it's general health and well being, how do you want to feel? And most of the time, it's you want to have better cycles, more energy, feel more vital in your body, right?
Right.
All
Right.
of those things.
Right.
And what are you willing to do to get there? So if you have low progesterone, most of the time you're probably going to have a bigger PMS symptoms, breast tenderness, swelling. You may have shorter cycles, i.e., more frequent bleeding. You may get tired more often. You may not have like the best mood that you want to be in most of the time. And I think that the key for me, at least, is knowing that this hormone, whatever that specific hormone is actually going to is like having a direct impact on how I want to feel
Mm-hmm.
and how I want to be in the world. So as a high powered woman, I probably want really good levels of progesterone because that is the hormone that's going to help me get shit done
Right.
in a way that's going to be powerful in the world. So optimizing your progesterone gives you that edge that you may want to do more amazing things in the world.
Right. Right.
And once you get like how that impacts your life, then you're like, oh wait, now I am willing to make some changes so that I can have those things. But it takes that like extra step of like, how will this actually help me get to my goals? Whether it be living a more amazing life, doing the work that I'm so passionate about in the world. And as soon as you get there, the conversation becomes very different, right? It's goes from no, I'm not willing to do these diet changes, or no, I'm not willing to take these supplements or figure out how I can get good sleep, to absolutely like I'm going to function better, I'm going to have a more productive phase in my life wherever I am right now, and those will motivate that change. So right. I think it can help to feel less overwhelming and more like exciting, to be like, yeah, I'm really excited to like get what I want out of this because that's going to help me in what I'm trying to do in my life right now. And then the third thing is finding a practitioner that resonates with where you're at. So what I find often is I'm vegan, so, and I have been for like 15 years.
Yeah.
And the number of patients that I see that are like, "Oh my God, I sought you out because you're vegan," is really high.
Mm-hmm.
Because they've had the experience where this is their chosen path. They go to another doctor, naturopath or not, who says, nope, you need to start eating meat. And they're like, oh, God, that's not what I'm willing to do,
Right.
even if that will make me feel good.
Right.
And like finding the practitioner that's going to be either A, willing to work with you where you're at, or B, is actually like at the same wavelength and knows how to adapt for the choices that you want to make. So if your choice is to be vegan or vegetarian, then it usually helps to have a practitioner that understands and can help you make up for that, whether it's a deficiency or not. I don't know that it's always a like vegans don't always have to be deficient in stuff.
Right.
I think it's just like the way that we live our lifestyle, and we're not aware that there are naturally inclined deficiencies. So if you go from a meat eating diet to a vegan diet, you have to be able to translate it and get all of your nutrients from other places.
Yeah.
So yeah, finding a practitioner that can really support you. Yeah. Is important.
Yeah, no, I think that so many people go, they're looking for support, and there's just all this, confusing and countering information. And I do feel like that is to find. And unfortunately, they are few and far between at this point, although I think we're going to get a whole nother generation. As the millennials kind of continue to grow into great doctors and professionals, and the generation, the Gen Zs, I think we're going to get more and more people like yourself who are vegans or who are progressive in some way, who understand how to kind of maneuver, because you can be a vegan with a very bad diet, just as you can be on a standard American diet with a very bad diet. So thank you so much for all this incredible information. And it's just so nice to connect with you. How do people find you? And can you do consultations? Are you doing virtual consultations?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Even if people don't live in California, can you still talk to them?
Yes.
Okay.
So we are, you can find us at www.holisticfertilitycenter.com. That's our website.
Okay.
And you can also ping me on Instagram, holistic_fertility_doctor. So holistic fertility doctor on Insta. And so your question about can we work with people virtually? Yes. We do consultations, so I can't be your doctor if you're not in
Right.
California, but I
Right.
can do a health consultation with you.
Okay,
So
great.
yeah. So there's that. And then obviously if you're wanting to work on fertility stuff, then we have very structured programs to help support people who are actively trying to conceive and are maybe having difficulty doing that.
Amazing. It's so wonderful to talk with you, and thank you for everything you're doing. And
Likewise. Thanks for having me.
thank you so much for listening to another episode of Reality Riffing. These are conversations that I think are important with people who are doing great things in the world about subject matters that need to be discussed. If you enjoyed the content, the conversation, please feel free to share with your people, share with your friends and family, rate the podcast below, and also subscribe.